I am ill prepared for this task.
Much like the last 10 years.
Much like the last 10 years. As we approach our 10-year anniversary here at Steps for Recovery, I thought that it would be a little bit of a fun experience for both Katie and I to talk about something that means a lot to both of us, but we probably both remember fairly differently. So really all I'm going to ask for Katie to do right now is to talk about where this came from. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I want you to tell me the story of where that came from.
Well, I'll be interested to know if you have a memory of where this came from since you were not there. But how far back in this story do you want me to go?
You could start wherever you want.
When this idea of Steps for Recovery came to be was back a long time ago. Josh and I were both working at UNC Rehab, and we were sharing a client.
He is no longer with us, sadly.
He has since passed away, but his name was Chemo, and he was a art professor at UNC.
Okay, that's not what his name was. His name was Kimawan, and his family and friends called him Kim. When I met him, he made the joke, "Why don't you just call me Chemo?" since he was going through cancer treatments at the time.
And he was in rehab, recovering from a brain tumor, and Josh and I both worked with him. Chemo was a very special individual. He was the kind of person that just made you want to go out of your way to help him. And he was so appreciative and so full of love, and he was just the kind of person you really wanted to help. And so our relationship with him went on beyond the time when he was a patient.
He was a patient on the rehab floor at UNC while I was a student. He was a person that I guess I was his therapist there during his first stay in rehab. After that, he got discharged home, but was readmitted shortly after because he had a CSF leak in his brain. Fluid was leaking, cerebrospinal fluid was leaking. And so he was readmitted to the neurofloor at UNC. Then from there, he was admitted straight home. And this is where Katie's story picks up again.
And so I would visit him at his home, and I would show him the things that I had been learning. He got some free therapy, I got some free practice. It was a win-win situation. But I also had in mind at that time that I wanted to do something different than work in the hospital setting. I had a vision in my brain about what Steps for Recovery could be. It originally started as just a forum for teaching. I was doing continuing education courses. That's why I was doing all that intensive training. And Steps for Recovery was the business that I created to facilitate my teaching revenue. But the dream was always much bigger than that. So through this relationship that I developed with Chemo, we started talking more about Steps for Recovery and what it could be. And he was extremely supportive. He was extremely encouraging. Once he heard about it, he's like, "I'm in. What do we got to do to make this happen?"
At this point, I think she's getting me and Chemo mixed up a little bit. Maybe not. I wasn't there on all these conversations. But she and I had also had conversations about Steps for Recovery. And I put together a few sort of mock-up logos. That retrospectively are just garbage. They were all sorts of funky colors and kind of line drawings of steps and people walking. But at the same time, they were like, JPEGs I found on the internet and kind of doctored up to look a little different. And all of them were terrible. All of my options were terrible. But now we can go back to where she's picking up the story.
And so one day I was in his apartment, and he got out a piece of paper and he just started doodling. And He was writing the name Steps for Recovery. He was drawing different pictures. And in a little small section of a big piece of paper, he just wrote Steps for Recovery and drew our now famous walking man. And the moment that I saw it, I said, that's it. That's our logo. And he drew some other things, and I said, nope, that one's it. and that pencil drawing from that has stemmed all of our branding that we do. And so even if you walk into our clinic now and you see that logo on the wall, it's a pencil drawn logo that's been turned into a sign.
So this is a good place for me to ask then if you could tell the story of how that pencil drawn logo turned into this.
I don't know what you mean.
So apparently she's forgotten that we spent about 3 hours in some dinky little computer lab in the basement of some building at UNC with me trying to figure out how to scan this thing in and clean it up enough to make it somewhat presentable as a logo. And then, so how did that pencil drawn logo go from pencil to this to now this?
Is this the ill-fated drawing where you tried to add arms to it?
We did totally try to add arms to this, and nothing about it ever really worked out.
Well, I don't remember all of it, though I do remember at the time you were trying to run like a sub 7-minute mile, maybe a sub 6-minute mile, and I remember that every time we got together to work on this, there was talk of how fast of a mile you ran. I remember sitting in a computer lab somewhere.
It was sub 6 for the record. 5 minutes, 28 seconds, best I ever did.
Taking this drawing, and I guess somehow made it digital. I don't know, you're the Mac whiz.
It wasn't so much a Mac thing as it was a Photoshop thing, and I don't think I was a whiz. I had some basic level Photoshopping. I think I've gotten better over the years.
And I remember at one time us thinking about the fact that this walking man had legs and no arms, and how arms are an important part of walking. And so we tried to add arms to the poor walking man, and it just didn't look right. It wasn't what he drew, and it didn't look right. So we ended up ditching the arms, even though everyone agrees that arms are a critical part of walking.
It didn't fit.
It didn't fit.
It didn't fit. You're right.
It didn't fit. So I guess you added the cross on the F, and I feel like we tried to take out some of the pencil lines and then decided that just didn't look right either. It needed to be what he drew. Pencil lines, everything, like it just needed to be the way Chemo made it.
Well, we did, kind of scrape out a little bit here and there.
I guess we did end up with the line under the whole thing.
Yeah, little odds and ends. But yeah, we tried to keep it as true as possible. Some of the places where the pencil line was a little thick or whatever, we kind of trimmed it back a little to make it work. But even, here in this example, we've got, sort of the pocket on the guy, and we took the pocket off in the current. And the pocket was just sort of a little error in the drawing, but we kind of cleaned that out.
It wasn't an error. It was the way the artist intended.
Okay. Okay. That's it. And then, over the years, we've kind of edited it up a little bit and added the second line, physical and functional rehabilitation, to it. That wasn't part of the original art, but was kind of necessary to distinguish the service that we provide here versus, like a more counseling-based type program. And we've even done some things, just with the walking man individually. In fact, that's a quote trademarked as well. So that's the story of our little logo 10 years later, as Katie remembers it.
Well, how do you remember it?
We'll just have to wait for the video to see. And there you have it, a little history of our logo. A lot of you have asked about it over the past 10 years, and I'm really glad to be sitting here to be able to share that little story with you all today. Thank you for your continued support and your faith in Steps for Recovery. I'm totally going to make you look like the villain in this too.